What I wanted to do very quickly is ground you a little bit in lab as well. Lab was founded in 1896 by John Dewey, and this is a particularly important year related to China and the US and some of the work that you've done and are supporting in these partnerships, in that at the end of April, on April 30th, John Dewey arrived in Shanghai with his wife Alice after being in Japan. He thought he was only going to stay for a little bit, but his curiosity grew, and he ended up staying in China for over 2 years. And during that 2-year period of John Dewey's life, he lectured extensively. He visited 11 provinces. The list you would have had to have page 3 for the quiz in terms of knowing all the provinces that Dewey went to. He gave over 160 speeches. And during this time, it was a period of intellectual enlightenment in China. A lot of other Westerners were traveling, including Einstein and Bertrand Russell. But Dewey sort of hung out the longest and sort of had the most curiosity. And he arrived at a really interesting time, because on May 4th, there was student rebellions and sort of a really important historical event that happened. So in some ways, we're celebrating student voice and thinking about young children and student voice and seeing that voice represented in art. But it's also the 100th anniversary of sort of Dewey really advocating for the voices of children and part of thinking about democracy and education. I just wanted to share, since this is, it would have been 100 years ago in July that Dewey was sweating in Beijing. Some of you were sweating in Beijing. And as he was going around, some show and tell, there were fun pictures taken, as I'm sure there were fun pictures taken of you, probably in group pictures as well. There's John Dewey in this one. And then another really happy-looking, jet-lagged guy there. Looks super happy. One more. And during this period, he was actually writing letters home. And you can read the letters. They're published in a book that his daughter put together called Letters from Japan and China. And he writes about all kinds of issues, both his visiting schools, visiting universities, what he had for breakfast, what he had for lunch, what he had for dinner. And it's a great sort of insight into China through Dewey's eyes. And for those of you who've read Dewey, he's not that accessible to read. And it's if you ever need to fall asleep, you actually can start to pick up any Dewey book and you'll fall asleep pretty quickly. But the amazing thing about these Chinese speeches is that these speeches were all given by him. They were translated by his students who had studied with him at Teachers College. He left here in 1904 because he had a fight with the university's president about not enough funding for the school. Goes to Columbia, ends up having a lot of graduate students from China who become key intellectual leaders in China. They become provosts of universities, they start schools, they become ministers of education. They all hosted him. They did the translation. And while they were doing the translation of his speeches, they had their own agenda. So it wasn't just sort of translating Dewey, but it was sort of moving their agenda forward in what would be published in the Chinese. And ultimately, the speeches were all lost, and his English version. So the records that we have of Dewey in the 1920s are from taking the Chinese translations and translating them back to English. And because of that, when you read Dewey's speeches from his trips in China, they actually read much more beautifully than any of the Dewey that you can read. So if you've ever really want to admit that you've never read Dewey, you don't like reading Dewey, I'm here to advertise that you can read the speeches that Dewey gave in China and you will not fall asleep. And they're on everything. They're on moral education, they're on early childhood education, they're a very wide range of topics. This is a blow-up of a thank you note that Dewey wrote and sort of gratitude. But I just want to really welcome everyone here. You're always welcome to come back when we're in session. We have a number of other folks from lab who are here. Sarah's there. Maureen is here. And I'm here, and you can contact any of us. Thanks, Wendy, I mentioned it earlier. If you're interested in seeing, lab in full motion, we're in motion in the summer. We have a lot of kids here too. But during the school year, and happy to be part of the Erikson network, and thrilled that you had an opportunity to all to build this community and sort of support the programming that happens. Final ad, also for Dewey. There's a new book out, since you're partly here and looking at Reggio and art, called Dewey for Artists. It's by a professor at the Art Institute by the name of Mary Jane Jacob. It's published by the University of Chicago Press. But if you are also interested in art and Dewey, this recently just came out and wanted you to be aware of that. So welcome. Happy to answer any questions later or at any point in the future. Have a great summer.